My fiancé returned from the battlefield, not only defeated, but also with a crippled leg. His promising future in ruins. Following my family's orders, I went to break off the engagement, but a line of text suddenly floated before my eyes. What a foolish female supporting character. The male lead is destined to become a king of a different surname. If you humiliate him by breaking the engagement now, you'll be disfigured and thrown into a beggar's den to starve to death later. She was dealt a perfect hand, but she's playing it terribly. I was scared half to death. Meeting Chichen's gloomy eyes, I didn't mention a word about the engagement, only asking after his health with concern. I am the legitimate daughter of the Shin family. My father is a minor 7th rank official at court. Apart from attending court on the 1st and 15th of each month, he spends every day scheming how to curry favor and climb the social ladder. As his greatest bargaining chip, he exhausted all his means to secure a good match for me, the legitimate son of the Grand General Qi, who held the 2nd rank at court. That was my fiancé. To put it in perspective, my father couldn't even see the back of General Qi's heels during court sessions. But with this engagement, my father could sling an arm around the general's shoulders after court and call him family. But just yesterday, this wonderful engagement met with disaster. News of General Qi's defeat reached the capital along with the news of the general and his wife's death and that their son Qichen had lost a leg. Instantly, my father's world collapsed. To avoid being implicated by the Qi family's downfall, he ordered me to break off the engagement with Qichen as quickly as possible. A damn man still dreaming of marrying my daughter. In his dreams, don't be sad, Shashu. Once this storm passes, father will definitely find you another top-tier match. I completely agreed with my father. I had no desire to marry a cripple. So early the next morning, I set out with our steward. Out of guilt, I had him bring along some nourishing medicinal herbs. When we arrived at the Qi residence, the steward who opened the door was dressed in white mourning clothes. As we walked in, the vast estate felt empty and desolate. Though people were still present, it exuded an air of ruin and decay. I was thinking about getting this over with quickly so I could be home in time for lunch. When in the next second, a line of text floated before my eyes. What a foolish female supporting character. If you break the engagement now, you'll never have a chance to cling to his coattails later. The male lead is destined to become the only king of a different surname. If you humiliate him today, you'll be disfigured, thrown into a beggar's den, and starve to death in the future. Such a winning hand to start. Yet, she played it so badly. What an idiot. I froze on the spot, still trying to figure out what these strange words were. When I looked up, I met a pair of gloomy eyes. Qichen was sitting under the eaves, dressed in plain white mourning clothes. His handsome face was so gaunt that his bones showed, and his tightly pressed lips were pale and bloodless. His gaze made my body stiffen. I heard him ask, "Miss Shin, what brings you here?" A chill ran down my spine. I felt like prey being watched by a raptor about to have my neck snapped in the next second. Qichen was sitting in a specially made chair. My mind was still on the strange words I had just seen, and I blurted out, I came to see you." "Oh, see me? For what? To see if I'm crippled yet?" "I came to bring you some medicinal herbs." I cut Qichen off and had the steward bring forward the herbs we had brought. Pointing at the large and small chests of herbs on the ground, I forced a smile and said to Qichen, "I heard you were injured. I don't know if these will be useful, but please use them for now. I have matters to attend to at home, so I won't stay long. I'll come see you another day. You eat well. Your health is important." After saying that, I turned and left, not daring to stay a moment longer. I felt like I had probably seen a ghost. After returning from the Qi residence, I subtly questioned the people who had been with me that day. No one but me had seen those words. The strange text had only appeared that one time at the Qi residence and didn't reappear in the following days, leaving me utterly bewildered. But it was better to be safe than sorry. The meaning conveyed between those lines was truly terrifying. Perhaps, just like in the storybooks, this was a stroke of fortune bestowed upon me by the heavens. I decided to act on it. That very night, I went to my father and told him I didn't want to break off the engagement. My father asked me why, and I said I was in love with Qichen. "In any case, father, I will marry no one but Qichen." And then I was locked in the ancestral hall. My father stood outside, roaring in anger. How could a brilliant man like me have given birth to such a muddle-headed creature? You stay in there and reflect on your actions, steward. No food for her for 3 days. But why would I be foolish enough to starve for 3 days? I escaped the very next night. I climbed out the window of the ancestral hall, scaled the wall of the Shen residence, and once I was out, I made a beeline for the Chi estate. By the time the Chi family steward brought me before Chichen, I was so hungry I was dizzy and faint. I collapsed right into his arms. When I woke up again, it was noon the next day. Chichen was keeping watch by the bed. Seeing my eyes open, he asked in a puzzled tone, "The doctor said you fainted from hunger. What happened?" A young maidservant nearby was holding a plate of pastries. I grabbed one and stuffed it into my mouth. Only after eating a few did I feel like I had come back to life. I wiped my mouth, my eyes red, and clutched Chichen's sleeve. With my head bowed, I put on an expression of someone too ashamed to speak. My father wanted to break off the engagement. I refused. So he locked me in the ancestral hall and wouldn't give me any food. Chichen was taken aback. The hand resting on his knee trembled. "You don't want to break the engagement? Why?" "Given the current situation, breaking it off is the best choice. The general's estate has fallen. Your father is doing this for your own good." As I listened, I secretly glanced up at him. Though his words were reasonable, the ruthlessness in his eyes was practically overflowing. I lowered my head again and continued pitifully. "No, I don't think so. Since we are betrothed, we should share in both glory and disgrace. I will not agree to break the engagement." Chichen was silent for a long time before tossing out a light sentence. "Rest well." Then he left. The first thing I did was ask the maidservant to arrange a table of hot food for me. I stayed at the Chi residence. During this time, Chichen brought me news from my family. Uncle Shen has been visiting Minister Song's residence frequently of late. The two of them are very close. I knew exactly what was going on. He plans to form a marriage alliance with the Song family. My half-sister was registered under my mother's name since birth, and she is of a similar age to Minister Song's legitimate son. Chichen looked at me, but said nothing. I went over and sat beside him, clutching his sleeve. "Chichen, my father has already given up on me. I only have you now." Chichen didn't move. He sat there in silence, his face still cold. But I knew that in his current state, as long as he didn't reject me, it was a tacit agreement. In the days that followed, I accompanied Chichen as he sought treatment for his leg. The process was agonizing. Chichen became increasingly moody and unpredictable. He cursed away all the famous doctors who were sought out from all corners of the land. Of the 10 doctors who came, 9 said his leg was incurable. The last one, not wanting to be scolded, gave a vague answer, saying it was up to fate. Chichen drove all the doctors away and sat alone in his room. With his head bowed and his hair disheveled, he looked like a madman. I pushed open the door and walked in with a bowl of medicine. I pressed the bowl into his hand. Meeting his bloodshot eyes, I told him, word by word, "There are so many doctors in this world. We'll see them one by one. If this batch doesn't work, we'll see the next. We're bound to find the right one. Chichen, don't give up." I gripped his wrist tightly. He took a deep breath and tilted his head back, downing the medicine. I had more confidence that Chichen's leg could be healed than he did himself. Chichen was destined to become the great Yang dynasty's only king of a different surname. A minor leg injury was nothing. And indeed, it was true. On an ordinary afternoon, a white-bearded old man knocked on the gate of the general's residence, claiming he could cure Chichen's leg. Half a month later, Chichen was standing. The moment Chichen stood up, I almost cried with joy. No one knew how happy I was. Chichen took out a handkerchief and gently wiped away my tears, his movements incredibly tender. I snatched the handkerchief from him and let out a vicious breath. To hell with the beggar's den. Whoever wants to live there can live there. I certainly won't. After his leg had fully recovered, Chichen told me he was leaving for the border to return to the battlefield. He asked me to wait for him at the residence. In my heart, "Shashu, you are already my wife. When I return victorious with military honors, I will marry you in grand style." I had no doubt in his words. "All right, go with peace of mind. I will wait here for your triumphant return." Chichen smiled and patted my head. Just then, the familiar text began to float before my eyes. Tisk, tisk, tisk. I thought the female supporting character had gotten smarter, but she's still so dumb. As expected, a supporting character is just a supporting character. No matter how hard she tries, she can't become the female lead. So, you just obediently stay in the capital while our male lead goes off to the battlefield to meet his true soulmate. I snapped my shocked mouth shut and threw my arms around Chichen's arm. I want to go with you. Chichen chuckled and patiently explained. The battlefield is dangerous. Besides, I'm going to redeem myself through meritorious deeds, so the conditions will be even harsher. I can't bear to see you suffer. Shashu, you just wait for me here at home. I'm not afraid of hardship. I just want to be with you. I sniffled and started to cry. Auntie could accompany Uncle to the battlefield, so I can too. I don't want to be blind at home knowing nothing about you, just passing my days in worry and anxiety. That sentence clearly struck a chord with Chichen. He sighed, pulled me into his arms, and nodded, agreeing to take me with him. But before I could even be happy, Chichen had me put on a common soldier's armor and join him in the ranks of the departing army. As we left the capital, the generals and officers in the front rode horses, while the soldiers at the back marched on foot. Chichen held no official rank. After General Chi's death, he could only enlist as a common soldier. Fortunately, many of General Chi's old subordinates were willing to follow him. All he needed was one victory, and his rise would be swift. But that didn't change the fact that he and I had to walk to the border city of Makhang. Once we were out of the capital, Chichen offered to carry me on his back. I thought about the long journey ahead and refused his offer. Later, when I truly couldn't walk anymore, he firmly pulled me onto his back. And after that he somehow procured a horse and rode with me. After a long bumpy journey, we finally arrived at Makhang one evening. Common soldiers had to train at dawn. I trained with them for over 10 days before the barbarian tribes attacked. Chichen, leading General Chi's old subordinates, won the first major credit. He was promoted, got his own tent, and I was logically brought to his side as his adjutant. From then on, I no longer had to do morning training. I slept until I woke naturally each day. A hot meal would be waiting for me when I woke up. After eating, I would wander around the city, occasionally substituting for Teacher Lu at the local school or helping Auntie Sue with her accounts at the market. My days were quite fulfilling. With each successive battle, Chichen's rank rose higher and higher. Eventually, I no longer had to disguise myself in men's clothing and could appear as myself. I had thought that by following him to the battlefield, I would experience some thrilling moments like sharing life and death with Chichen, taking a blade or a sword for him to earn his life-saving gratitude. But none of that happened. The army held the barbarians back so effectively that even in Makhang, the closest city to the battlefield, the lives of the common people were stable. Over time, I managed to become a teacher at the school. The original teacher, Master Lu, was too old and after a lifetime of teaching, could no longer get out of bed. In Makhang, learned people were extremely rare. Master Lu was the only teacher. My father, for all his faults, had hired various tutors for me since I was young. I was proficient in nearly everything, from the zither and chess to calligraphy and painting, more than qualified for the job. This evening after dinner, Chichen held me in his arms as we watched the stars in the courtyard. The sky on the border was truly beautiful. There's a martial arts competition in the camp tomorrow. Does Shashu want to come and watch? I was drowsy in his arms and mumbled, "No, I have to teach the children tomorrow." Chichen nodded, lifted me up, and carried me back to my room. I rolled over under the covers, watched Chichen close the door and leave, and was just about to close my eyes when the text began to float. "You big dummy, you can teach the kids another day. You have to go watch Chichen's competition. Tomorrow's competition is the first meeting between the male and female leads. As the last two standing, they have an epic fight. Sparks fly, lightning flashes, and they totally fall for each other. Wha? So, childhood sweethearts are no match for a fated encounter. No matter how deep the love, it can't beat destiny. I'm so sad. Men are all such pigs." I was instantly wide awake. A martial arts competition was it? I was definitely going. The next day, the sky was clear and blue. When I arrived at the military camp, Chichen's adjutant eagerly led me toward the training grounds. Before we even got close, I could hear thunderous cheers and shouts. As I walked over, people I met made way for me. Teacher Shin is here. Perfect. Young General Chi is fighting right now. Hurry to the front. It's spectacular. Teacher Shin, quickly, there's a spot here. I went and stood there, looking up at the fighting ring. The two figures on it were locked in a fierce battle. One of them was Chi Chen. The other was also a young soldier with delicate and refined features, dressed in combat attire. Their movements, a powerful kick, a swift punch, radiated a vibrant energy. If not for the strange text's warning, I would never have guessed she was a woman. She and Chi Chen were evenly matched. The moment one gained an advantage, the other would instantly counter. The sparring match was absolutely brilliant. I didn't miss the bright glint in Chi Chen's eyes as he looked at his opponent, a light I had never seen before. A tightness formed in my chest. I left without seeing the end. After leaving, I wandered aimlessly, not knowing where to go. I sat down by the river, staring blankly at the water in the distance. My mind was a mess. I didn't know why, but it was just a mess. Suddenly, with a splash, someone jumped into the river. My spot was hidden by trees, so the person didn't see me. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do, when I saw the person undo their clothes, revealing white shoulders and a gently rising chest. I immediately realized who it was. Relieved, I hesitated, wondering if I should make a sound. Just as I was about to leave, quietly, people approached from behind. A few soldiers, arms slung over each other's shoulders, were laughing and heading towards the river. The person in the water panicked. If those soldiers came over, she wouldn't have time to get away. She would be seen completely and the secret she had hidden for so long would be exposed. I watched the color drain from her face, then stood up and walked out. Huh? Teacher Shin, you're here. General Chi was just looking for you. I stood blocking the path and said with a smile, I felt a bit stuffy, so I came here for some fresh air. Seeing that I had no intention of moving, the men exchanged a look, then said, well, we won't disturb you then, Teacher Shin. The men turned and left. The person in the water got dressed and came ashore. She scratched her head in embarrassment and introduced herself first. Just now. Thank you, Miss Shin. I'm Xia Shang from the cavalry. I nodded. Xia Shang had thrown on her clothes in a hurry and they were almost completely soaked. This was definitely not a good time for a conversation. We exchanged a few pleasantries and then went our separate ways. On the way back, my mood had lightened considerably. I thought that even if Chi Chen really did fall for someone else, it wouldn't be a big deal for me. My initial reason for refusing to break the engagement, influenced by those strange words, was simply the fear of one day being disfigured and left to starve in a beggar's den. Given my current relationship with Chi Chen, even if we did break the engagement, I would be able to walk away unscathed. Halfway back, I ran into Chi Chen, who was looking for me. Seeing me, he looked relieved. He walked over and took my hand. Song, he said you came to the training grounds. Didn't you say last night you weren't coming? I swung his hand. Of course, I came to witness General Chi's heroic prowess in the competition. Chi Chen raised an eyebrow, a smile in his eyes, looking thoroughly pleased. Then you didn't come in vain. Your general took first place and won a fine piece of leather for you. I nodded. Then I thank you, General. A verbal thank you won't be enough. On the way back, Chi Chen said he would be free the next evening and wanted me to accompany him to the Lantern Festival in the city. Without waiting for my reply, he declared it was his thank you gift and I couldn't refuse. So, I didn't tell him that the school was closed tomorrow and I was free not just in the evening but during the day as well. Well, a thank you gift is a thank you gift. A few days after my encounter with Xia Sheng, she came to find me with some gifts, saying she wanted to thank me properly. As she was leaving, she shyly asked me to keep her secret. I nodded in agreement. I had experienced life in the military camp when I first arrived. It was hard, tiring, and very difficult that Xia Sheng could survive in there and even earn significant military honors. Honestly, I admired her for it. Perhaps because of this shared secret, Xia Sheng and I started seeing each other more often. She would bring me strange little trinkets she found somewhere, and I would often send her nourishing soups. Xia Sheng's martial arts were among the best in the army, but she was just too thin. Considering I had seen her jump into a cold river for a bath, that kind of behavior would damage her health in the long run. Back and forth, We ended up becoming good friends, which was something I hadn't expected. One day, as I was returning from delivering soup to Xiaosheng, I ran into Qichin at the courtyard gate. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me with his lips pressed together. I was a bit confused and spoke first. "Why are you standing at the gate instead of going in?" Qichin suddenly reached out and pulled me into an embrace, burying his head in my shoulder. His muffled voice came out. "In half a month, the army will advance on the barbarian stronghold. Once I win the battle and take the top honor, we will return to the capital. Then we can finally get married." I nodded non-committally. "Your safety comes first in all things." Qichin seemed to have more to say, but he remained silent until we were inside the courtyard. He gently released me, turned, and went into the kitchen without another word. I blinked, glanced at the kitchen, and then went to dig up the fruit wine I had buried under the tree. I had learned to make this wine from Auntie Chen next door. Her wine was renowned in Makhang. I learned from her, so I figured mine couldn't be too bad. There were 2 jars in total, one for Qichin and me to drink, and the other for Xiaosheng. Perfect. When news of the great battle spread, the people of Makhang began to gather vegetables from their fields and pigs they had raised to send to the military camp. Some had sons in the army. Others had husbands. Those left at home were the old, the weak, women, and children. Before every major battle, the camp would become a lively place. On my way, I saw many scenes of families bidding farewell. When I reached Xiaosheng's place, it was quiet. She was polishing her long spear, looking no different than usual. I called to her from outside. She looked up and saw me, a puzzled look on her face. "Shashu, what are you doing here?" I held up the clothes in the crook of my arm. "The journey there will take half a month. The weather is getting cold. You need to wear something thicker." Xiaosheng froze for a moment, then took the cotton-padded clothes from my hands. "This is unnecessary." I walked in myself, took out a small cloth pouch, and pulled out the silk ribbons inside. "That cloth you use for chest binding is hard and stuffy. I got these from Auntie Chen. Use these from now on. They'll be more comfortable." Xiaosheng stood there at a loss. I put the things down and didn't stay long. As I left, I told her, "Swords and blades on the battlefield have no eyes. Military merit is important, but you must prioritize your own safety. I'll wait for you to come back and drink with me." Xiaosheng's eyes were red as she nodded heavily. It wasn't until many years later that Xiaosheng briefly told me about her past. She came from an ordinary farming family. Her mother had given birth to 3 daughters before finally having a son. To support the son, she and her 2 older sisters were sold to different places. Xiaosheng was sold to a brothel. She had just come of age that year. She fought desperately to escape, cut her hair with scissors, smeared her face with dirt, and threw herself into the army. In my eyes, life in the army was hard and exhausting. But Xiaosheng said the army was good. It was the only place she could live. She had no way back. Fortunately, she endured it all, fighting with her life to carve out a path for herself. We returned to the capital in the spring. The war had ended in the winter, but it was too cold for the army to travel, so we spent the winter in Makhang. Qichin had sustained some injuries. I made him lie in bed to recover, watching him drink his medicine every day. It's worth mentioning that Qichin and Xiaosheng had gone through a life and death situation on the battlefield together. Xiaosheng had taken an arrow for Qichin. The hidden arrow had been aimed at his heart. If Xiaosheng hadn't blocked it, Qichin would likely have been in grave danger. Qichin held me tightly as he spoke. I could feel his fear, and I hugged him back just as tightly. "Shashu." At that moment, I felt like I was about to never see you again. After we captured the barbarian Khan, I asked Xiaosheng why he saved me. He said he was afraid that if I died, you would be sad. He took that arrow from me because of you. Whatever the reason, I Qichin owe him my life. I must live well so as not to fail him. What was all this about? And what was with that look? As if you were guarding against a thief. I pushed his head away. "I'm going to take some medicine to Xiaosheng. You just lie there and rest." Once the weather warmed up, returning to the capital was put on the agenda. Qichin had won a great victory this time, capturing the barbarian Khan alive and expanding the territory of the Great Yang. This was something even his father had never accomplished. When the army entered the capital, The crown prince led all the officials to welcome them at the city gates, and the common people lined the streets to cheer. Chechen went to the palace, and I returned to the Qi residence. Not long after I sat down, the steward rushed in to report that my father had arrived. When I saw my father, his face was glowing and he couldn't stop smiling. The moment I stepped through the door, he strode over, took my hand, and said repeatedly, as expected of my daughter, "You correctly predicted that Chechen wouldn't fall. You are our family's great hero now." I forcefully pulled my hand back. "Father, hurry up and prepare my dowry. I'm in a hurry to get married. The dowry can't be small or people will say our family is social climbing." "Nonsense. What social climbing?" My daughter stood by Chechen when he was still a broken man. Where could he find such a good woman? "It's his good fortune to marry you." I had to restrain myself to maintain a smile. In any case, Chechen has been promoted now. Our family can't look too shabby and become a laughingstock. "Father, you figure it out." Watching my father's retreating back, I thought about many things. For example, the words I could see had said that Chechen would hold a grudge against me for breaking the engagement, leading to me being disfigured and thrown into a beggar's den to starve. If that had really happened, what would my family have been doing? No matter how vengeful Chechen was, he wouldn't be so idle as to stop my father from bringing me a steamed bun in a beggar's den, would he? How would I have starved to death? And for another example, I had followed Chechen to the border for over a year with no news. Now that I was finally back, the first things my father said were all like that. Not a single question about whether I was well, if I had been hurt, or if I had suffered. Not a single one. Although I had always known my father was opportunistic, it was only at this moment that I truly felt his coldness. It wasn't until Chechen returned from the palace that I felt happy again. Chechen was also very happy. He reached out, lifted me into his arms, and spun me around in the courtyard. He said with a laugh, "Shashu, I've inherited my father's title. I also mentioned us to His Majesty. The imperial edict for our marriage will arrive in a few days. I can finally marry you. We're getting married." I was dizzy from the spinning and lay in his arms. I knew how hard Chechen had worked to achieve this moment of joy. Fortunately, the clouds had finally parted to reveal the moon. Chechen said the imperial edict for our marriage would arrive in a few days. But after more than 10 days, there was still no news from the palace. Chechen had already started taking his men to purchase the necessary items for the wedding, leaving the house in high spirits every day. I stayed in my room, embroidering my wedding dress. My already married half-sister made a special trip to help me. While chatting, I asked her if she was doing well in her husband's family. She smiled smugly and said, "Don't worry, sister. I'm doing very well." I was relieved. Originally, my father had his eye on Minister Song's legitimate son, but my sister had taken a liking to his second son. I had already run away by then, so my father could only rely on my sister and had to go along with her wishes. It seemed she had chosen correctly. This sister of mine had been extremely clever since she was young. In her own words, she could play those people to death. Embroidering a wedding dress was a time-consuming and energy-draining task. I worked on it for nearly half a month, while Chechen practically transformed the entire residence. The most obvious change was the red silk hanging inside and out, filling every corner with a festive atmosphere. But strangely, the imperial edict for our marriage never came. One day, Xia Shang invited me to burn incense at a temple outside the city. The bodhisattva enshrined in this temple was said to be very efficacious. When Xia Shang returned to the capital, she was rewarded for her merits and given an official post. She was now a junior general. She is now working under Chechen. Apart from other things, they are a pair who cooperate well in work. Chechen had once mentioned to me after dinner one evening that when he was in Makhang, he had considered transferring Xia Shang to be his adjutant. I didn't know about that, but I did know that Xia Shang had been in the cavalry in Makhang and had never served as Chechen's adjutant. I asked him about it, and Chechen said, "When I sparred with him back then, I admired his skills. I thought that if I had such a fierce general under my command, the time it would take to return to the capital could be shortened considerably. But then I saw that kid always trying to curry favor with you. I was too busy being on guard against him to even think about having him under my nose." At that moment I was stunned. So the bright look in Chichen's eyes when he looked at Xiaoshang during the competition was because of that. When I offered incense to the Bodhisattva, I wanted to pray for many things. But in the end, I only made one wish for Xiaoshang, Chichen, and myself to be safe and well. I just hoped the Bodhisattva wouldn't think I was greedy for praying for 3 people at once and refuse my wish. On our way down the mountain, we encountered a dangerous situation. A group of mountain bandits was chasing a carriage, forcing it to the edge of a cliff. Xiaoshang drew her sword and charged at the bandits without hesitation. I led the remaining maids and guards to pull back the carriage, which was about to fall. The carriage curtain was blown open by the wind, revealing a lavishly dressed young lady inside. She looked terrified, her hands gripping the window frame tightly, her face pale, and her red, swollen eyes filled with the despair of facing death. My heart went out to her and I comforted her. "Don't be afraid. I'll pull you up." She nodded at me vigorously, tears streaming down her face. Fortunately, I had brought enough people and we slowly pulled the teetering carriage back onto solid ground. Just then, text began to flash rapidly before my eyes. If the female supporting character knew she was saving Princess Jia, the very person who's going to steal her husband, she would definitely regret it, right? The reason the marriage edict is so delayed is because the emperor values Chichen and wants to marry the princess to him. Washinshu and Chichen finally returned to the capital and could get married, but now a princess has appeared out of nowhere. The ship I'm on is about to sink. I'm so sad. I froze for a moment, but didn't let go of the carriage. I didn't know before, but I knew now. But so what? This was a living, breathing person. In Makheng, life was valued above all else. By the time Xiaoshang had dealt with the bandits, my group had pulled the carriage completely back onto the road. Xiaoshang and I helped the young lady out of the carriage. She thanked us, crying intermittently. A short while later, a troop of guards on horseback came galloping up the mountain path. The leading officer knelt before the young lady. "Your subordinate was late in coming to the rescue. Please forgive me, Your Highness." Princess Xia was quickly surrounded and led away. On the way back to the city, Xiaoshang held my hand and talked to me a lot. One thing she said stunned me. She said she wanted to marry me. I covered my mouth, looking from her to myself, the meaning unspoken but clear. "Shang, we are both women. Why are you talking nonsense?" Xiaoshang waved her hands, her face blushing. "It's not what you think. I mean, if you ever need it, I can help you." That was Princess Xia. At the last palace banquet, His Majesty intended to betroth the princess to Chichen. Although he refused, it's clear His Majesty hasn't given up. We can't question the affairs of the royal family, but one thing is certain. If Chichen ever fails you, I will take you away. I have an official post now and my own residence. It might not be as comfortable as the Qi estate, but I will do everything in my power to give you a good life. I looked at her, my heart filled with complex emotions, something swelling up inside my chest. Before I could speak, text began to fly rapidly before my eyes. Though they were just words, I could tell they were very excited. This could work. The two of them, I've wanted to say it for a long time. They're super sweet together. The following content became somewhat explicit with some words replaced by symbols, making it hard to understand. I selectively ignored these words and first thanked Xiaoshang for her kind offer. I thought if it really came to that, this was a viable escape route. I have always been someone who plans for herself. But what happened next was rather unexpected. The day after we returned, Princess Jia with a large retinue of palace maids and eunuchs knocked on the gates of the Qi residence with great fanfare. She brought me many luxurious fabrics and jewelry and at the same time the imperial edict for my marriage. After I returned, I learned your identity from the palace servants. So I went to Father Emperor and asked for this marriage edict. The princess took my hand warmly, handed the edict to Chichen, and tilted her chin at him, saying, "Mission is my lifesaver. If you dare treat her poorly, I will have Father Emperor banish you to a bitter, cold land and never let you return." I listened with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. Who could have predicted such a turn of events? As the princess left, she happily announced that she would attend my wedding banquet and even see me off on my wedding day. I nodded in agreement. After many twists and turns, my marriage to Chichen was finally set for the 3rd month of the coming year. But in the second month of the new year, urgent news came from the border. The new Khan of the barbarian tribes had allied with the Sieying from the north, amassing an army of 100,000 strong and was pressing towards Makhang. The barbarians sent an envoy to the capital, demanding that the great young return the cities they had lost and send a princess for a marriage alliance or else their army would invade. The two sides had just finished a major war not long ago, and both were greatly weakened. Logically, they should have been recuperating, but the barbarians and the Sieying had formed an alliance. Chechen began leaving early and returning late. A few days later, he brought back news that most of the ministers at court advocated for the marriage alliance and returning the conquered cities. Chechen was furious. I had seen with my own eyes how hard won the previous victory had been. It was no exaggeration to say that the victory was built upon the flesh and blood of countless soldiers. But now, not only did they have to return the cities, but they also had to send a princess. And currently the royal family only had one princess of suitable age, Princess Jia. A few days later, a palace eunuch came with a message saying that Jia had invited me for an outing. Ever since I rescued Jihua from the bandits, we had gradually become good friends. And because we were both women, Jihua often invited me to gatherings. But this time, the atmosphere lacked its previous ease. We went to a hillside halfway up a mountain in the suburbs. The scenery here was excellent, a precious spot we had discovered by chance. Sitting on a blanket on the grass, Xiaohua smiled and raised her cup to me, then drained it in one gulp. She looked at the capital city not far below the foot of the mountain and twisted her lips. I might never see such scenery again. The news from the court could not be hidden from her. Her face flushed from the wine. She snuggled up and hugged me. As a princess, I accepted my duty long ago. I knew this day would come sooner or later. To trade my single life for 100 years of peace for the great young, so the people don't suffer from the ravages of war, is well worth it. She buried her head in my arms and said in a muffled voice, "It's a pity I won't be able to see you off on your wedding day." I promised, but now I have to break my word. After she finished speaking, I turned and left, not daring to stay a moment longer. That night, back at the residence, I pulled Chechen aside and asked him, if we have to go to war, what are our chances of winning? Chechen wasn't surprised by my question. He held me and sat down, answering seriously, 60%. If I am the commander-in-chief with Xia Sheng as my second-in-command, it could be 80%. Before I could be happy, I heard him add, His Majesty is old. He's been scared witless by those civil officials. He won't agree to send troops. How can that be? Is a marriage alliance the only way? I was the one who saved Jihua's life. Besides, those barbarians are wolves in sheep's clothing. They've been planning to annex us from the start. This talk of marriage alliances and returning cities is just a stalling tactic. My dear girl, don't be foolish. If Princess Xiaohua is sent over, she'll just be tortured to death by those savages. I stared at the words only I could see, my own rapid heartbeat echoing in my ears. I grabbed Chichen's arm for the first time, revealing a side of myself I had always hidden from him. I said, Chen, the Crown Prince is already a grown man. His Majesty is old and frail. The Crown Prince has always supported sending troops. This information came from my sister, who is now a minister's wife. Her husband was a supporter of the Crown Prince. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I waited all night for Chechen, who had left the residence. He didn't return until the crack of dawn. But he brought good news. Soon after, the emperor fell gravely ill and the Crown Prince became regent. The officials who were unwilling to fight were dragged out by the Crown Prince and a few were beheaded in front of everyone. After that, no one dared to object. Chechen was appointed the Grand General who pacifies the nation and led the army to war. On the day of his departure, Jiahua and I watched them leave from the city walls. The war lasted a long time. At one point, when supplies were running low, Jiahua, sword in hand, visited the residences of many powerful nobles, pressing the blade to their necks and forcing them to contribute money. I followed behind her, leading a group of palace servants with large chests to collect the gold, silver, and jewels the ministers brought out. Another 2 winters passed before news of a great victory came from the border. On the day of my wedding to Chechen, the banquet was incredibly lively. Xiaohua and Xiaosheng saw me off together. Xiaosheng had already resumed her female identity. She was now the dynasty's one and only female general. A year after our marriage, I gave birth to a daughter. Both Xiaoshang and Jia wanted to be the godmother. They argued until they were red in the face. I tried to mediate, saying they could both be godmothers. Xiaoshang, relying on her superior skills, had already snatched the baby and was cooing at her in her arms. Xiaohua chased after her, cursing. I shook my head and saw Qichan give me a look. The two of us quietly slipped away from the crowd to find some peace and quiet elsewhere.